Vanishing Folklore and Beliefs.
Csabor from Folktales of the Magyars. Public domain reading. There was once a young prince who was perhaps not quite 25 years old, tall, and his slim figure was like that of a pine tree. His forehead was sorrowful like the dark pine. His thunder-like voice made his eyes flash. His dress and his armor were black, because the prince, who was known all over the world simply as Csabor, or Mr. Csabor, was serving with the picked heroes of the Grand King, and who had no other ornaments besides his black suit, but a gold star, which the Grand King had presented to him in the German camp for having saved his life. The fame of Csabor bravery was great, and also of his benevolence, because he was kind to the poor, and the Grand King very often had to scold him for distributing his property in a careless way. The priests, however, could not boast of Csabor alms, because he never gave any to them, nor did he ever give them any money for masses, and for this reason the whole hierarchy was angry with him, especially the head priest at the great king's court. But Csabor, being a great favorite of the great king, not even a priest dared to offend him openly, but in secret the pot was boiling for him. One cold autumn the great king arrived at the royal palace from the camp with Csabor, the palace standing on the bank of a large sheet of water, and before they had taken the saddles off the stallions, the great king thus addressed Csabor, "My lad, rest yourself during the night, and at dawn, as soon as day breaks, hurry off with your most trusty men into Romania, beyond the snow-covered mountains, to old Demeter, because I hear that my Romanian neighbors are not satisfied with my friendship, and are intriguing with the Turks. Find out, my lad, how many weeks the world will last there, i.e., what is the news, and warn the old fox to mind his tail, because I may perhaps send him a rope instead of the archiepiscopal pallium." Csabor received the Grand King's order with great joy, and having taken leave of Dame Marguerite, he dashed off on his bay stallion over the sandy plains to the banks of the Olt, and from there he crossed over during a severe frost. He arrived at the house of Jordan Bor, the king's confidential man, whose guest he was, and here he heard of old Demeter's cunning in all its details, and also that he was secretly encouraged by the great king's head priest to plot against the sovereign. Hearing this, Csabor started on his journey and arrived on the 4th day in Romania, where he became the bishop's guest, by whom he was apparently received cordially. The old dog, being anxious to mislead with his glib tongue Csabor about the events there, but it was very difficult to hoodwink the great king's man. Csabor never gave any answer to the bishop's many words, and therefore made the bishop believe that he had succeeded in deceiving Csabor. But he was more on his guard than ever, and soon discovered that every night crowds of people gathered into the cathedral. Therefore one night he also stole in there, dressed in the costume of the country folk, and to his horror he heard how many people were conspiring with the bishop against the great king, and how they were plotting an attack with the aid of the Turkish army. Csabor listened to these things in great silence, and sent one of his servants with a letter to the great king the next day. In this letter he described minutely the whole state of affairs. The spies, however, laid in ambush for the servant. They attacked and killed him, and took Csabor-ur's letter from him, and handed it to the bishop, who learnt from its contents that Csabor-ur had stolen into the cathedral every night. He therefore had the large oak doors closed as soon as the congregation had assembled on the same night, and in an infuriated sermon he informed the people that there was a traitor among them. Hearing this, everybody demanded his death, and they were ready to take their oath on the Holy Cross that they were not traitors. Whereupon the bishop ordered a stool to be placed on the steps of the altar, sat down, and administered the oath to all present. Only one man in a brown fur cloak did not budge from the side of the stoop. The bishop therefore addressed him thus: "Then who are you? Why don't you come to me?" But the dark cloak did not move, and the bishop at once knew who it was, and ordered the man to be bound. Whereupon the multitude rushed forward to carry out his command. Thereupon the man dropped his brown cloak, and behold, Csabor-ur stood erect like a dark pine, with knitted brows and flashing eyes, holding in his right hand a copper mace with a gilt handle, his left resting on a broad two-edged sword. The multitude stopped, shuddering like the huntsman, who, in pursuit of hares, suddenly finds a bear confronting them. But in the next moment the crowd rushed at their prey. Csabor-ur, after cutting down about 30 of them, dropped down dead himself. His blood spurted up high upon the column, where it can still be seen in the cathedral to the left of the entrance, and although the Romanian priests tried their best to whitewash it, the great king heard of this, had the head priest imprisoned, and went with an immense army to revenge Csabor-ur's murder. With his army came also Dame Marguerite, dressed in men's clothes, who wept at the foot of the blood-besprent column, till one day after Mass they picked her up dead from the flags.